I'm Steve Lascalzo, and this is The Way. Welcome to This is The Way podcast's coverage of the Skeleton Crew series. This is the recap and discussion for Episode 8, the Season 1 finale. A fantastic, fun fairy tale in space comes to a close. If you've watched all 8 episodes of the show, you're ready to listen to this podcast today. Any Star Wars content already available as of the release of this episode can be included. That means if it was ever on Disney Plus, in print somewhere, sanctioned by Lucasfilm, well, you may hear it talked about at some point during the breakdown of Skeleton Crew. If that's alright with you, we can make the jump to Lightspeed. Directing Episode 8 is showrunner and co-creator of Skeleton Crew, Jon Watts. In my opinion, he's added another quality show to his resume. I like Skeleton Crew very much. I've heard the ratings aren't so wonderful, though, but I think that's more Disney to blame than Watts. Co-creator and co-writer with Watts on this episode was once again Christopher Ford. There are just a few times I think Ford could have done something different that would have been better. I mentioned those during past recaps and discussions, but I'm also not privy to Lucasfilm's story group creative interference. And for the most part, I think the dialogue was smart and believable, and that can sometimes be hard to get across with young actors. Sometimes the dialogue doesn't really seem to work because they don't understand it that well. I think it worked here. The description on Disney Plus for the show on both the thumbnail and episode pages reads, "A journey filled with adventure comes to a surprising end." Well, I'm not sure how surprised I was, but it was enjoyable. The runtime reported by Disney Plus for this episode is 41 minutes. Now, you can find that on the show page, and that would make it the third longest episode. Now, if you add up the advertised runtimes, Disney claims there's 5 hours and 18 minutes a show. With 8 episodes, that means around 40 minutes an episode. Now, why do I spend all my time on this? If you have the ad-supported version of Disney Plus like I do, you are forced to sit through separate, poorly timed out breaks, sometimes 4 of them, I think, and each one of those is about 1.5 minutes, so your time is valuable. And remember, this is on a service that we already pay to access. That is 6 minutes of ads you can't skip, even if you've already seen the episode. The average that they advertise is 39.75 minutes per episode. Okay, almost 40 minutes. Now, by advertise, I mean that's how long they claim the runtimes are in the parentheses. But they are including times that they're not really even part of the show. I'm not saying credits aren't important, but look, most people don't carefully watch them like I do. They just move on. But also included foreign language credits for all the different languages and the last time on Skeleton Crew footage that you get shown before the episodes 2 through 8. Episode 8's actual footage, and I'm talking about from the sound of the lightsaber at the beginning until the cut to black before the stylized credits, that are made to look like Kh'ymm's datapad, there's only 32 minutes and 35 seconds of action. That's still the third longest episode of the series.
This is interesting.
Now, like a good protocol droid, I did some more number crunching. Add the actual runtimes together for all 8 episodes, we get 4 hours, 11 minutes, 50 seconds. So let's round up. We'll say 4 hours, 12 minutes. We'll be generous. That's an hour and 6 minutes less than advertised. This means we're only getting an average of 31.5 minutes of show compared to almost 40 per show. So even if we cut out all the credits, all the pre-shows, we skip ahead, we still have to sit through the 6 minutes of ads. So the question you need to ask yourself is, do you feel you are getting the value that you're promised? Do you care? If the answer to that question is no. Just remember, this is not a free service asking you to pay to cut out or cut down on ads. This is a paid service that asks you to pay significantly more to not see ads, and then doesn't even guarantee that you will never see ads when you pay for that premium. I gotta tell you, it's only gonna get worse, not better.
Uh-oh. It's not good.
Time to talk crew. Director of photography is Sean Porter. He had the first 2 and last 2 of the season. David Klein had the middle 4. Production design all season long was handled by Oliver Scholl and Doug Chang. Editor Andrew S. Eisen returns. He handled episodes 1, 6, and the finale. Mick Giacchino produced the score for all 8. I think he did a very good job and would make his dad proud. I did notice the music at times, but it was almost always for something good. I don't recall the score or music ever feeling wrong for a scene. Sarah Hallie Finn helped do the casting, and one of the big questions was, how would the kids do? I don't think anyone was worried with Jude Law, but it was the kids. Some liberal troublemakers tried to poison the wells before the show, claiming people would send hate mail to the kids, but instead, it's all fan mail. The kids turned out great. Okay, visual effects. I mentioned John Knoll a few times, and with good reason. He was the visual effects supervisor, and everything looked and felt like Star Wars. Costume design was all handled by Louise Mingenbach, and she did a great job. She had designs of the pirates and the citizens of At-Attin and on Lanupa. Everything felt like it belonged in the universe. And, of course, she took over for Shauna Tripsick, who passed away in October of 2023. I say take over. It was Tripsick who was the name associated with Star Wars costume design post-pandemic. Tripsick handled the last 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, and Ahsoka. Makeup design was Samantha Ward, and hair design by Lane Friedman. Both ladies worked for John Watts on Spider-Man No Way Home and his Apple TV movie, Wolves. And before we move on, I'd like to credit the stunt coordinators once more, George Cottle and Colin Fallenweider. There wasn't a lot of action to deal with, but you gotta believe it's gonna be tricky when you have to work in stunts with kids. All right, that's going to be a wrap for giving credit to the crew, but if you're interested in hearing more, you can review our past recap and discussion episodes. I haven't heard many other podcasts take that time to do that. It's something I occasionally do to provide myself with neat insights, but I think it's really great that you get to hear who is making the magical television that you get to watch. Let's move on to the cast.
What do you want?
What's your name?
There are some who call me.
Jude Law is the first starring credit for every single episode, even the one that we weren't sure he was in, episode 1, Captain Silvo. His portrayal of Jod Nanawood gave the show credibility. His presence on screen was significant, and it would seem that the name his character gives to the kids is probably the real name, although it was a running gag that he was known by many other names. In every episode, Law's credit is followed by one of the core 4 kids. I guessed at the pattern after just 2 episodes. Turns out I was right on target. This time, as predicted, it's Ravi Cabot-Conyers, just as it was after the first episode. He played Wim. There was symmetry with Ryan Kira Armstrong as Fern following him just as she did after episode 1. But she was first after Mr. Law in episode 2 and episode 7. You see the pattern? Then was Kiriana Crater as KB. She was the first kid credit after episodes 3 and 6. Rounding out the quartet, Robert Timothy Smith as Neel. They did a great job. SM33 was voiced by Nick Frost, and he followed the kids in the credits ever since his first appearance in episode 2. But IMDb lists him in 8 episodes with an uncredited voice appearance in episode 1. I'm inclined to believe that's a website error. Next is the co-starring section in order of appearance. Carrie Condon plays Fern's mom, Undersecretary Farah. Solid, believable. Very good job as Fern's mom. Tunde Adebimpe is Wendell, Wim's dad. I liked his portrayal, even if there were some times that I felt something wasn't quite right. I'm not sure how else to put that, but I guess I describe Wendell later in this podcast, so you'll have to tune in and listen. Alia Shawkat was the voice of Kh'ymm, the owl cat, though she'll probably always be Maybe to me.
Marry me.
Maybe Funke. Next is the guest starring section. Marie is Cass Boogie, or Bug, B-U-G-G-E. Gary is MJ Kang. Marie and Gary are the parents of KB. So KB, Marie, Gary.
Sorry.
Numa is voiced by Geneva Carr, and the voice of the supervisor is Stephen Fry. I was wrong when I guessed last week that since the voice was unmodulated that he had to either be human or alien. But listen, in the US, he's probably more famous as just a voice than for any acting or comedy that he did in Britain. Gunter is played by Jaleel White, yes, of Family Matters fame. Cisa Gray was Kona. Vane, once again played by Marty Matulis, who now has more appearances on Skeleton Crew than he did when he first appeared in Season 3 of The Mandalorian. Beef is played by Dominic Burgess, and I really do think that this is a nod to director Jake Schreier, who worked on this series. He directed episode number 5 of Skeleton Crew earlier in the season. That was You Have a Lot to Learn About Pirates, the one set on Lenupa. Or the first one set on Lenupa, I guess. But he directed 6 out of 10 episodes of the Netflix series Beef. So I think that's where they get Dominic Burgess's name. Bonj Falfa makes a random appearance after being last seen in episode 1 for just a brief moment. Shane Algor must have a great agent. The character's name is a direct reference to Bob Falfa from American Graffiti, a George Lucasfilm predating Star Wars. And finally, we have a few X-Wing pilots. Red Squadron's commander is Andy Powers, back after episode 3. New to the show is Blue Squadron's Kali Tan, which looks like a spaced-up version of the actress playing her, Caitlin Shara Moore, C-A-I-T-L-A-N, and she is Kali Tan. Well, how did she get the job? She was an assistant to John Watts on the Season 1 set of The Old Man. How about that for a reward? Andrea Detweiler is the Tarsant or Alien X-Wing pilot performance artist. She's not given a guest starring credit, but she is listed later as Specialty Creature Supervisor. So let's talk about the performers in the costumes for a moment, because we don't know who voiced that Tarsant. Rob Ramsdell performed in the suit, or in a suit, as SM-33. Casey Barrowman did some of the performance work for Neel and was a photo double. Dawn Denninger was once again in costume for Numa, Neel's mom. Pirate Nall was Carrie Jones. Mike Estes performs the movements of Pax. Jasper Anderson performed as Snobby Snee, and he's also listed later as a specialty creature assistant, I guess under Andrea Detweiler. Carrie Gunner Lee did the performance for Miss Ick, the Ithorian dog walker, and curiously, Sweeta last week was listed in the acting credits, is listed now in the performance section, played by Sydney Rose Walker. The internet says she played a Weequay pirate on the frigate. The prop master was Stephen B. Melton, and finally the guys that worked on the droids, Mike Senna, key droid technician, and Victor Franco, droid assistant. Look, I think we've covered enough, so can we get to the episode now?
He can go about his business.
You can go about your business.
Move along.
Move along. Move along.
You hear the lightsaber before you see it. Jod ignited it, of course, at the end of last episode, but we're picking back up around the same moment. So the parents have no idea that the ship has let a wolf in among the sheep. Jod had warned the kids on the Onyx Cinder last episode he's going to carve up their parents. He would make it painful, if they ratted him out. So they just have to sit there and let Jod spin his lies. He turns off the saber with a flourish, and it's possible that the parents also heard about Jedi just like Wim did when they were kids on the planet. But they certainly haven't seen any in their lifetime, and not just because we find out later there hasn't been an emissary visit in quite some time. Jod is a bit of a showman. He's using the same tactics that he used on the pirate crew to extend his life. Tactics that have helped him stay alive a long time, despite repeatedly failing. He's telling the parents what they probably expect. The children were trouble. They flaunted safety protocols. And the kids are powerless to speak up. They can't stop him because he's threatened to kill their parents. That doesn't stop Fern, who at the end of last episode was scared into silence on the ship, but now she gets a little too brave that she's back home.
I got to see firsthand just how troublesome they could be on our little adventure home. Didn't I, Wim?
Yeah. We were way too troublesome.
Her speaking up serves as a reminder to Jod. Yeah, she's a big mouth. She's the one I should keep close. So he volunteers to bring Fern along to meet the supervisor, and that thrills Fern's mom. Farah is eating up what Jod is putting down. The rest of the parents, they're just so glad to have their kids back, they're not asking any questions. But the kids can't even get their parents alone because Jod assigns the security droids to basically keep them under house arrest. And he says they need to report back to him if they try anything or say anything. The kids cannot risk killing Fern and her mom, so they're all sworn to secrecy, basically. Farah unwittingly walks right into another one of his traps.
Of course I should accompany her.
Certainly. I'll take special care of both of you.
The title card appears for the last time, finale, and we move to Wim's house. Dad is heating up a meal, and unless they used to get shipments of new technology, looking at this food preparer, it's like looking back at cooking technology hundreds of years in the past in the Star Wars universe. It's so Star Wars retro. It was really interesting to look at. It kind of felt like we were, you're looking at a future past or a past future. Wim still cannot talk to his dad, though. There's a security droid standing right there. The dinner table discussion isn't really in Wim's favor anyway. Wendell has no idea about the danger, and his thoughts are already back on Wim's future as part of the At-Attin community.
No, Dad, that's not what I meant.
If you don't get assessed, how are you going to have a career?
Dad!
How are you going to be part of the great work?
There's a lot more to the galaxy than the great work.
You think I didn't want to just take off and meet a Jedi? And
He's not even a...
I thought the acting was strong in this scene. Wim isn't sure what would happen if he calls Jod a liar. Will the droids side with him? So he tries talking in code with his dad, but Wendell is oblivious. Any danger can be handled by the supervisor, of course. That's where the scene shifts with a classic Star Wars wipe to a transport where Fern and Farah are heading with Jod to meet the supervisor. Farah is also oblivious, concentrating more on Fern's future because she's not aware of the present danger. Jod gives Fern a look to keep her in line, and then the scene jumps back to Wim in his room where he picks up a walkie-talkie and radios to Neel. Neel doesn't want to risk the droids reporting to Jod, and it turns out to be good advice because one has been eavesdropping.
I gotta go. Neel, we need to save Fern. Neel, please help.
All communication will be reported to the emissary. Who are you speaking to?
Oh, come on, we need to save Princess Fern. Oh, okay, Wim, okay.
Wim's quick thinking saves him. He's playing with his dolls again.
No, please, leave me alone. No, you are mine. Not so fast, Helmet. Lone Star. Yes, it's me.
Jumping back to Fern and Farah and Jod, we're about to find out about the supervisor. And remember from episode 4, we have seen inside a tower already. It turns out this one is very different. There's a conical shape in the center of the tower, and there are pillars again, like there was on At-Attin, but there are cords hanging everywhere, and there's control panels. It is dark. Yeah, it's night outside, of course, but it's a very dark room, and there's a reason. A droid doesn't need artificial light.
Is it abandoned?
No, it's just... You see, the supervisor so rarely grants an audience.
Is that under
Secretary Farah, I see.
It turns out the supervisor is basically a giant astromech head. Now, it reminded me of R2-D2 in the way that the eye alternated between blue and red, but the head was more like an R5 unit, and the color's black, not silver. I mean, this might have been a state-of-the-art design way back when it was created, but the sound that accompanies the turning of the head reminded me of the robotic arm that lifts Han out of the carbonite chamber in Empire Strikes Back. The voice of Stephen Fry wasn't modulated last episode over the public address system, but it does seem to be now. Maybe it wasn't last episode because then it was directly interacting with the PA, and now it has to speak to humans in the room and there's an echo? I'm not sure. It recognizes Undersecretary Farah and even Fern. How it reveals that was interesting.
Is that Undersecretary Farah, I see? One of my most dedicated citizens. I have been watching over you and your daughter with great interest, and I'm pleased to see she has been safely returned.
That there is, of course, Senator Palpatine's line to Anakin at the end of The Phantom Menace. Jod is surprised by this development, but not Farah. It is not a secret. It's not like no one knew who was at the center of the control. It's all by design. It's possible she knows the true nature of the supervisor because of her position, but I get the impression that everyone knows and has always known.
You're ruled by a droid?
As decreed by the Great Work.
And I see a new face. Please introduce yourself.
Greetings, Supervisor. I am Jod Nanawood.
The supervisor wants to know, who is this guy? Jod makes a terrible mistake. He doesn't understand the history of the planet, and he doesn't know what's happened. So he introduces himself as an emissary, but also a Jedi.
I must admit, I began to doubt an emissary would ever visit our humble mint again.
Indeed, our apologies. We've had our hands full. You understand, thwarting the many evil schemes to destroy the Republic.
Weird that the droid has doubts, I think. I don't know if a droid should be doubting, but Jod continues to lay it on thick. Usually this works. His mouth is moving too fast, though. He's relying too heavily on intimidation and spectacle. His welcome is wearing off. He might have tried a little bit too soon to get the frigate through the barrier. He's got gold fever, though. He's not thinking straight.
I need my other ship, currently in orbit, beyond the Great Barrier.
Why doesn't your second ship simply land as you did?
You ask too many questions of your emissary. What you need to do right now is obey.
He is treading on thin ice here. His way has always worked before. This time, the supervisor's logic kicks in.
Well said. Strict obedience to authority has kept At-Attin running smoothly for generations. Your other ship may land if you can clear up one tiny detail.
Jod is still counting on brute force making the difference, and he's not entirely wrong. One ship will do it, but I'm not sure Jod realizes as soon as that ship comes through, the jig is up anyway. He also doesn't know how caught up on galactic history they are on At-Attin.
You see, the last message from the Republic stated that all Jedi were traitors. So, which are you lying about? Being an emissary or a Jedi?
Now, Jod is the one in the trap. Fern senses the opportunity and confirms Jod's real intentions.
He's a pirate trying to invade the mint!
As I suspected. Seize the imposter!
Now, Jod's on the defensive. He gets the saber out. He starts defending himself against the stun blasts from the surrounding security droids. It's possible droid has destroyed an astromech or two in his time, because he doesn't give the supervisor a chance to try anything else. He stabs right through the eye of the droid, and the supervisor sputters out some last words as the security droids go silent, and there's a planet-wide power outage. if the supervisor did expect this, well, I mean, it let a dangerous man into the most sensitive spot, which doesn't make much sense. The outage affects everything. Lights, communication, the locking mechanisms at the landing pad where the Onyx Cinder sits, and the security droids everywhere. Now, the barrier remains intact, but Jod is at the nerve center of the defense systems, and the citizens aren't used to having to fight back.
What have you done?
Fern, bring your mommy up to speed.
Wim is in his bedroom. He sees what's happening while he's laying in bed because the lights are out, and he's going to take action soon, but Fern and Farah are the ones still in grave danger. Jod's now the one in control, so far as what he says goes, and nobody's going to stop him. He still wants to get that frigate through the barrier, and he's about to destroy it, but Farah's afraid. Do that, and the planet is completely vulnerable. Now, Jod's certainly no good guy, but the barrier does something for him, too. It gives him and his pirate crew a monopoly. Farah is afraid of the unknown, so she basically offers up the planet to permanent slavery. She must have heard stories about the other planets being destroyed, and it might even be part of a legend taught at an early age to promote the safety protocols on the planet. Jod does what he does best, lies about his true intentions.
I don't want to destroy anything. I just want to land my ship. We'll take our fill of credits and we'll go. You'll never see us again. No one will get hurt.
He's lying. He's gonna stay, and he's gonna...
Fern speaks up, but then shuts right back up when the lightsaber's ignited and placed right between her and her mom. No mother's gonna let someone murder their daughter in front of them, so Farah agrees. I will help you get the frigate through the barrier, and Jod is able to communicate finally with Gunter by holo projection. I've taken control. You can begin the invasion of At-Attin, and the ship passes through. The pirate frigate starts through the barrier, and indeed, the defense systems allow it to pass. The lights go from red to green. Farah and Fern cannot stop Jod, so the rest of our skeleton crew is going to have to do something.
Look!
What the heck are you
The
doing?
droids were spying on us, but now I can finally tell you. John's a bad guy. He's lying. He didn't save us. He's trying to get us.
The pirate ship arrives. Wim and his dad, Wendell, head outside in time to see the frigate break through some clouds, and it's very eerie. It looks like a spaceship coming through the clouds like we've seen in other sci-fi movies. We see Neel once again taking a bath. Instead of Wim looking down through the skylight, though, it's Neel looking up this time as the frigate passes overhead and looks down with the lights through the window. I'm wondering, does his species need a lot of baths? I mean, is it just enjoyable for him? Is it something special? Or is it just Neel loves baths? Numa and her other babies look up in wonder as well. KB is the first one we see take any action. She runs into her garage just before the pirates open fire on the populace. Wendell is trying to get his electric car working. He's pretty spineless. He wants to run. His son is trying to save a friend, but Wendell has no idea what the pirates are capable of, and he doesn't care. Once again, he is not listening to Wim. This character seems very weak, but I'm wondering, is this part of Wendell losing Wim's mother and then having to raise his child by himself and not wanting to risk his only child? It could be. That might explain it. KB and Neel arrive on hover bikes, and they want to mount a rescue plan.
You kids go home. It isn't safe.
Do you think Fern's okay? I don't know, but John must have done something to the supervisor. So we have to call for help. But how?
The kids are not going to just sit back and take it. They're going to risk their lives to save their friend and their planet.
Remember on the hotel planet? The X-Wings chased the pirates away. And Kim, the bird lady from the telescope moon, knows them. So we get to the ship, fly out past the barrier, and call her for help. So we blast off, call the real good guys, and beat the pirates.
Wim speaks the episode title line this time. They mount up right out to Wendell's objection. I don't like this resolution at all here. I know they probably wanted to get the kid Bonj Falfa in again for some reason, but I would have rather had Wendell go take one of Neel's young siblings' bikes, as an homage to the Goonies, rather than this. The young actor that plays Falfa says nothing, and I know that's in the script, right? But he almost looked frozen. No emotion on his face. He looked like it was actually just a robot that had powered down. Then we don't even get to see Wendell take the bike from him, which would have served to show us he had something of a spine, push the kid to the ground or something. But what follows is really recovers everything, because it's like E.T. or Stranger Things. Well, I mean, that bike riding in Stranger Things was an homage to E.T., but the kids and Wendell are dodging pirate gun barge fire on these bikes, and they head into the woods. They must not head to where the Onyx Cinder was in episode 1, because I think that area would have looked very different after a ship rose out of the ground, especially a ship of that size. They are still going to have to jump the ravine, though. Wim's dad would sooner trust his son's friend than trust Wim.
Wait, I'm heavier than you!
Just trust me!
Of course, they all make the jump, and Wendell actually shows some emotion this time, some excitement. But they have to get moving again. The pirates were in the air, so they went toward the city center and cut them off. But our biker gang heads into this domed building, and I think it's the one that the kids were taking their assessment tests in episode 1. You can see desks lined up in one of the shots. And speaking of shots, the pirates shoot up the dome and a stray shot hits Neel's bike. Neel tumbles to the ground, but heroically, he urges the rest of the group, keep going. I'm okay. And I knew exactly what was being set up. I actually called it in an earlier recap and discussion podcast.
There's so many pirates. I think the ship's gonna need cover. Okay, be careful.
That's right. Neel is gonna go and man that turret. Wim, Wendell, and KB reach the Onyx Cinder without further trouble from the pirates, and KB jumps into action. Wendell is surprised. How can you kids handle this ship? I think Wim doing more in this scene would have been better. Show his dad, maybe my aptitude isn't on paper or in a data pad, rather. Maybe it's different from the assessment tests, the ones that his dad has been obsessing over. But as it is, no, it's just they try to take off, and the docking clamps are locked on the landers. The only way to get them off, you got to restore power. To do that, you have to go into the supervisor's tower. Wendell's line to Wim in the scene wasn't set up very well, if you ask me, based on what the character has been doing in the scenes, in this episode, and throughout the series. He's a real weak, but maybe they're counting on him having gotten excited, with that jump. Maybe that was a signal to us that he's opening up to this plan.
All the power relays are routed through the supervisor's tower.
Can you turn them on?
Son, you are talking to a level 7 systems coordinator. Get the bike.
I'll also say that line works on younger viewers much better than it did on me as an adult. My kids desperately wanted everything to work out. So when Wendell comes on board with that line, well, I think my daughter just about jumped out of her seat. So sometimes, yeah, dialogue does work better on kids than it does on adults. I'm not suggesting the line was awful. Just, maybe a little corny.
Yes, just like on Hannah's planet. I found a turbo laser.
Neel reaches the roof, and remember Neel's girlfriend on At-Attin, Hannah. I think most people caught on when he talked about providing cover, but he knew it was there, and he saw how to open up the shielding because of that stop on At-Attin. So his time alone with her paid off. This is an example of how script writing here on this show is so much better in this show than the most recent one. Jod is still in control, though. He's in the supervisor's tower, communicating with Kona through a hologram, and she says these citizens are pushovers. The ones that resisted were made into examples. Jod almost is showing some empathy, but his concern about not injuring too many people is so he has workers in his mint. Slaves, really. For Farah, her worst nightmares seem to be coming true.
The barrier was supposed to protect you from this. It was supposed to keep you safe from the galaxy.
And now we have to do something. Yeah, the galaxy's scary and dangerous. Everywhere we went. Even the worst places. There are good people too.
Fern tells her mom to trust her, and she does. What a difference from Wim and Wendell, huh? I mean, in a weird way, Farah must think, well, Fern has much more experience with outsiders than I do, so it does make a little sense. But I'm not sure I buy Fern coming up with this plan to get a stun gun and use it on Jod. They both just saw him take apart droids using them on him. Maybe he can't sense it through the Force, but they're sitting right next to him. And yeah, they're whispering, but he's no longer talking to Kona, so he's been watching them. He fires a blaster bolt right between them.
You two, stop scheming.
Stop scheming, he says. But Fern is still defiant. And now I think it's out of place. But if you're a 12-year-old girl watching Star Wars, you identify with this child. My oldest loved every second of it.
Citizens of At-Attin, I have taken control.
Jod will now address the populace and inform them of their place in his new At-Attin order through the public address system.
If you follow my orders, my men will show you mercy. If you defy me, punishment will be severe. You all now work for me.
Wim and Wendell are back on a hoverbike, heading to the supervisor's tower. They have to dodge more fire from the pirate barge, but they fire a little too close for comfort for Jod. So Vane, the pirate, apologizes. Someone's heading towards your position, but we got him. Well, no, they didn't. Almost immediately after that, the turbo lift doors open and Wim comes out with his walkie-talkie. I called the X-Wings. It's over. Fern has never looked more glad to see Wim. Maybe it's because he's about to spin a lie that she could be proud of. A story just like the ones she was telling Wim in episode 1. They're outlandish, ridiculous even. But it's all a ploy to get Wendell inside the room unseen. Wim walks toward Jod, and then he walks around him to the side, takes his gaze away from the turbo lift doors. He's talking about a crystal of the founders, and an ancient warrior guarding a tomb or something. He makes a mistake he couldn't possibly have known about, though, saying the entire Jedi army is on their way.
That's quite a tale.
I'm just giving you a chance to surrender now, because the whole entire Jedi army is on their way.
Wim, the Jedi are all dead.
Now, Jod knows for sure now this is a lie. He can't figure out why he's telling this lie, but he is properly distracted. Wim bought his dad just enough time to get inside, but he's not going to have enough time to get the power up and running, so Fern jumps in to continue the lie.
Wim found the crystal a long time ago, and he's been working with the Jedi to lure you here and trap you.
The tall tale is just good enough to get the job done. Wendell didn't have to do much. He just pushed a few buttons and reroute the power, I guess. The Onyx Cinder now free of the clamps, and Jod is pursuing Wendell in the tower after he spots him. Fern heads toward a still non-functioning droid to try and pry a stun blaster away. The droids must not have just been relying on power, though, because Wendell got it up and running, and then Jod realized it, and then the droids are not moving. They must have been under total control of the droid supervisor. The tower's not that big, so Jod was going after Wendell, but then he sees Fern trying to get that blaster, fires a shot at the droid. Now, he could have just killed her. There is a soft spot, or maybe Jod just isn't aware of how much danger he's in. Now, everyone in the room is his prisoner. Wim and Wendell didn't get to see the lightsaber action earlier, but they certainly know what a blaster can do.
Do not do that again. Everyone where I can see you. Come on. Now.
KB gets the Onyx Cinder airborne, and she was using her time waiting for the power wisely. She managed to get the headless SM-33 activated somehow. His body can still take commands from the head. They're piloting the ship up through the atmosphere and past the frigate. Now sure would be a good time for some cover fire, and it's Neel to the rescue, just like we thought. Somehow, though, he blasts the one cannon that we see taking aim, and just in the nick of time. But, it was only one of many. Still, all that KB needed was that short distraction. She gets outside the barrier, she calls kh'ymm, and luckily, Miss Owlcat is on call.
Kh'ymm, do you read me? Pirates are attacking our planet. You said to call you if we needed help.
Child, you found your way back to At-Attin?
Yes, I'm sending you the coordinates. Can you send your friends in the X-Wing fighters?
X-Wings? I'll contact the New Republic. They're the greatest pirate busters in the galaxy.
How is the New Republic going to get through the barrier to help? Well, before KB can talk it out with kh'ymm, the Onyx Cinder is hit by a blast from one of the pirate snub fighters that had pursued her. For some reason, this far past the barrier, the ship immediately nosedives towards the planet.
We've been hit. I'm going to take evasive maneuvers.
Win, can you hear me?
I got the message through, but I'm hit. I'm going down.
Look at what you've done. Go look.
I mean, it seems like it's pretty strong gravity in that case, and I guess communication now works through the barrier? I mean, Jod had to get special access with Farah, but the kids had to take the ship through to send the message. So, it isn't planet-wide and it isn't all the time, or is it something that Jod had done? Anyway, she's falling through the barrier, and again, it's weird she's falling at all, but Jod hears KB's message, so he knows what's going on. His only recourse now, I guess, is to lay a guilt trip on the kids. They're watching helplessly from the tower as KB hurtles toward the ground in the Onyx Cinder. This was the most worried my kids were in the whole series. I think partly because, my review podcast guest co-host truly thought that a sacrifice was coming from one of the core four. But there's no giant explosion, or even the sound of an impact, but the ship does crash at the edge of the city. Wim, Wendell, Farah, Fern are all stunned. Fern breaks the silence with one of Star Wars' least liked shouted lines of dialogue.
No!
For all the bad no's, this one does seem to work. And even Jod seems moved in this moment, but I think he's more angry than upset, and I think some of that transfers to Fern. When he reminds them that the help is going to be locked outside the barrier, she locks eyes on the lever that can destroy the barrier. Farah tries to hold her back. She's still worried. What's going to happen to our safety? Jod takes aim at the lever and shoots, but Farah pulls Fern down to safety. Then Wendell gets brave for a moment, but Jod uses the Force to throw him back. Wim heads for the lever, but Jod threatens not Wim, but Wendell with the lightsaber, and Wim has to freeze.
You're no Jedi. You lied. And now, the real good guys are coming.
The good guys. No one's coming to save you, boy! Grow up!
What a great way to work in a You're No Jedi callback line. The title of the episode is also once again spoken aloud by Wim, but I loved that. You're no Jedi, just like he's no Jedi from Bib Fortuna in Return of the Jedi, or I am no Jedi from Ahsoka. We're about to get what we've been looking for many, many episodes. Jod's backstory. So, let me work this out here. He may or may not have been an orphan, but he was living in a hole in the ground, and a Jedi found him, saw potential, trained him a little, but then she was hunted down and killed in front of him, or while he was made to watch. So what is he referring to? Is he supposed to have been young enough to be a child during Order 66 and the Inquisitors? Jude Law is 52 years old in real life, and that doesn't really matter that much. But he doesn't look really young. The Mandalorian and Skeleton Crew are set around 9 years after the first Death Star falls. Luke was born around 19 years before that, so let's say 30 years. If the Jedi on the Run found and taught Jod the very first year after Order 66, and if Jod was indeed around Wim's age, as he starts his story saying, well, 12 plus 28 puts him around 40, so he can play younger, but if Jod was somewhat Force sensitive, this means for about 12 years, the Jedi during and before the Clone Wars never found him. He was never identified as Force sensitive, never went to the Jedi Temple. Now that's not impossible, it does happen. And in fact, if this is how they want to tell the story, it is best not to elaborate further, because that's only going to introduce real problems. So the way it stands, though, you can say, well, he's just telling another lie, or he's exaggerating ages, or exaggerating time periods. Maybe he's leaving out some key details. The main part of the story is he saw something horrific as a child, so to him, space is dark and full of terror, to paraphrase a line from another show. He accurately describes the night sky. The star field that we so often see in Star Wars. But he's focused on the negative and the overwhelming dark instead of those pinpricks of light. How did he avoid the Inquisitors, though? If he was Force sensitive and angry at seeing his mentor killed in front of him, how did he not get recruited or killed? That's what makes me think I'm not so sure this really happened, the way he says.
That's the galaxy. It's dark, with a few pinpricks of light. And for those, I'll kill who I need to kill.
Wim is forced to let go of the handle, and Jod turns off the lightsaber and lets Wim pass to get to his father. Jod is pleased, but he makes the mistake that almost all villains make. He monologues. He turns his back on everyone. He doesn't want to hurt anyone. He just wants them all to go back work making credits. That's all.
What is it you call it? The great work? Beautiful. You can all carry on exactly as you were before. Crafting the one thing that means something in this galaxy. Cold, hard credits.
Wendell finally steps up, giving him a nice punch in the face. Jod only had a little training, remember, so maybe being mindful and sensing the danger wasn't something his Jedi mentor got around to teaching? Maybe on the run she couldn't be centered and calm either? Well, the lightsaber goes clattering to the ground and Wim goes after it while Fern and Farah try to help Wendell get the barrier down. Jod pushes them back with the Force. Wim picks up the saber, and in a callback to his heroic moment in Tak Rened's lair, this time he makes sure he's got the lightsaber in the correct orientation. It doesn't matter that he's holding it the right way, though. Jod has the Force and tries pulling it out of his hands towards him. Now, if Wim didn't have a good hold on it, they'd all be dead. Jod would probably use the saber then to cut the pedestal in half and maybe anyone who was in the way as well, like the parents. I wonder how many people, and if you, thought as I did, that Wim was going to turn it on and then let go and let it go and impale him, or maybe turn it on when he was sliding closer. But no, Fern joins Wim in the tug of war for the saber, but Jod wisely just lets go, and they fall backwards. He's still having to contend with Wendell, and it sounded like his fingers were being broken, but who, if not for Jod's use of the Force, would win this battle? I think it's Wendell. I mean, he seemed bigger to me, and I think it's just the Force that is keeping Jod in this, match here. So Farah is going to have to overcome her fear of the unknown to help. Fern pleads with her, please. And she does.
Mom, please!
The lever's down, and the barrier starts to shut down. It has been nighttime, but the barrier disintegrating bathes the planet in a bright, almost sunlight strength light for a little time. Jod has his blaster pointed at Wim and Fern, and Wim turns on the lightsaber. So there's no way Jod wouldn't be able to overpower and kill Wim with the blaster. There's no way Wim is going to block enough blaster shots. He's not totally evil, and he knows it's really over now. He trusts what he heard from KB. The cavalry is coming. The citizens of At-Attin, gathered by the pirates, all see the barrier disappear, and for the first time, they look up and see stars. Other than a wow from Neel, we don't hear anything until the sound of X-Wings on approach cuts in.
Lock gas spoils and attack position.
We're going in.
Setting shields double forward.
Here we go.
Not just X-Wings, B-Wings too. And yes, B-Wings and Y-Wings and stuff like that, they've appeared in the original trilogy, but this, they're looking really cool here. And the real good guys have finally arrived. It's the same captain that responded the first time that Kh'ymm called, and there's a blue jumpsuited squadron flyer with him, and a Tarsant based on what we see in the credits. Not a race of alien like Elo Asti from The Force Awakens, one of the pilots on at Ilum or Starkiller Base. Not the same alien. The pirate frigate is getting bombarded, so the pirates on the ground have to retreat. They get back on the barges that they flew in on, back onto the ship, so that frees up the citizens that they were rounding up, including Neel's family. We see his family there. The X and B-Wings continue to fire on that frigate, with the B-Wings shooting a composite beam laser. It's red, but there are 4 points coming together from the wings into a single beam. Imagine, well, you saw the episode. It's kind of like the Death Star, but a red beam. And the frigate gets disabled. It's going to crash. That, unfortunately, reminds Wim and Fern about KB. So they head for the turbolift. They're going to go try to find her. I didn't know I wanted it, but Wim calls out to Jod, and it felt good that he did so.
Jod!
I love the idea that Wim still has this little nugget of hope that there is some good in Jod. I mean, he heard the story, but it doesn't make everything okay. But there's still that moment where he's like, come with us. Come see if KB is all right. There's nothing Jod wants to do, though. He just wants to watch it all burn from the window. The frigate crashes in the city, and Wim, Wendell, Farah, and Fern rush out to find the Onyx Cinder. They find her. KB spills out of the cargo hold of the Onyx Cinder along with stacks of credits. I mean, it almost looks as if she's sleeping on a dragon hoard. The kids rush to her side, and the first thing she says is the first thing a B-1 battle droid asked Jod when the droid was turned on in episode 2 in that Port Borgo droid depot.
Did we win?
Yes!
Yep. One of my better landings, that is.
And here's SM-33, operational, carrying around his head, kind of like Headless Horseman or something. Neel gets reunited with his new pet, SM-33's rat sidekick. The parents usher the kids out from under the wreckage. They point out, it would be dumb to get crushed after all that adventuring. Fern points out, hey, Wim, you're not going to have to take your assessment test. Well, at least for a while. I mean, much of the city, including that building, is in ruins. Wim got his adventure all right. And then he looks up to the sky, which is filled with stars now instead of the barrier. He sees X-Wings and a CR-90 Corvette, which is just like the Tantive 4. that's it. The credits this time don't go immediately to a star field, though. This time the credits are stylized to look like they're part of the data pad that Kh'ymm was reading in his stories about the Jedi and the Sith. And just before it goes to main credits, we see that's exactly what we've been watching. It was Kh'ymm's data pad on his bed, and there are even a couple action figures lying right beside it. We don't get an epilogue or a post-credit sequence. We are just left to wonder what happens to Jod, what happens to the kids. This show, though, more than some others, was definitely about the journey and not about the destination anyway. We did not get everything answered, but I think we did get enough. The one thing people would have really been upset about to not find out about is what was Jod's backstory. Truth or lie, it didn't matter. We needed to hear something.
When I was your age, all I cared about was not starving. I was living in a hole in the ground, and a Jedi found me. She may have been desperate and ragged like me, but she told me I had potential.
And I read there was a scene shot with Jod's Jedi, but it ended up not making the final cut. So it's out there somewhere maybe, but you know, they thought, let's just tell this story from the kid's point of view.
And that was, well, she only taught me a little before they hunted her down, and they made me watch whilst they killed her.
Now, we don't get an epilogue for the planet or the kids or the families or Jod. We don't see what happens to the town. We don't see the aftermath of the crashing pirate frigate, the New Republic's help in rebuilding. I think we can deduce that someone in the government would appropriate all those credits, and they probably conscript the planet into making more for them. And if I had to guess, I would say it's the First Order coming in. We'll protect you, right? Not everything, though, always needs to be wrapped up so tidy. We got the bullet points covered. And I enjoyed this episode just as much as the others. The show as a whole wasn't amazing in the way that Andor was, but it was fun. It's something I could do with my kids and feel good about. It's not an insult to say that it wasn't amazing. The Goonies didn't win big name awards. That show, that movie didn't make perfect sense. And I know that's not the only movie to influence the show. That's not integral to my point here, though. Skeleton Crew was a show I felt good about getting my kids excited to watch each week without Disney. KB's parents were just there. And that's how you deal with things like that. Their relationship wasn't a focal point. It didn't even get mentioned. That's how, if you're Disney and Lucasfilm, that's how you avoid offending people like me. Don't explain it. You can include it if you want. Don't explain it. Don't draw attention to it. That's the key for them moving forward. That's how they avoid disasters like The Acolyte.
Yeah, you're probably right.
This show seemed to be pitched like a one season and done project, but if we were to get a second season, what would that even look like? Now, nothing has been announced yet. But Watts and Ford, the co-creators, did tell Entertainment Weekly they purposely left things open the way they did in case they do get another chance to make more, and that their ideas help them construct the season so that if they get to do them, that it all works together. One of the quotes was from Watts: "We're waiting to find out what everyone else thinks, but we've always had an idea of where this could go even before we made the first season." I'm really glad to hear that. I don't know. I think they should have drawn this story out a little bit more, had more episodes. I mean, if they had designed it from the start to be something like 20 episodes, you could have had the kids going from planet to planet for a little while, and then Watts could have developed this world and the characters and places in the galaxy more. That's not what we got. Oh, and Watts also told EW that he wouldn't necessarily just pick up with the kids being 6 months older, and that he would enjoy the opportunity to tell stories with the kids being a little bit older. At-Attin is now part of the galaxy, like it or not, without the barrier. So there are ramifications to that.
Exactly.
I am on board with them going a second season, but the show will have to build an audience from word of mouth because I've heard that the ratings weren't that great. Please, if you like the show, tell your friends. I mean, who wouldn't want to see like Planet of the Week style episodes? That sounds great to me. Maybe that feels like a stretched out plot, though. I don't see how you make a second season with the original group, though. I know they said you wouldn't want them just 6 months older, but I think anthology series is the way to go. Bring in a new group of young actors and a new antagonist. Bring us to a core world where the kids end up in the Outer Rim for the first time. Rich former Imperials mixing with children of heroic rebels. An orphan of a Jedi that went on the run and fell in love. Based on the interview with EW, though, it sounds like if there is a season 2, it will still follow our same skeleton crew. Our next This Is the Way podcast episode will most likely be the January news update at the end of the month, our first of that type for 2025. Shortly after that, we'll be taking part in the annual Star Wars Podcast Day. That's an episode that airs specially on February 7th. What that's going to be about yet has yet to be determined. Now, if you have an idea, I am open to considering listener suggestions. Email This Is The Way Podcast headquarters at thisisthewaypodcast@gmail.com. We have Instagram, X, and Facebook accounts with the address @thisisthewaypod, but email is really the best way to be heard. Thank you for listening to This Is The Way Podcast recap and discussion of Skeleton Crew's Season 1 finale. I'm your host, Steve Lascalzo, and this is The Way. May the Force be with you, always.